Welcome to Game Soup. It's a game design podcast where we throw ideas in a pot and see what's cooking. I'm Chloe Montgomery, and I'm joined by your X-Crawl.
Kayla dies.
I'm good. I'm worn out, but I'm getting there. Full of ideas for the future. So.
Aww, that's sweet. I'm on the start of a brave new arc. I released the Transgender Deathmatch Legend 2 trailer yesterday, so that's out.
Yeah.
It's in all of the places. I'm going to take it to Backakit later this year.
It's on Threads. It's on Instagram stories.
It is not on Threads. It is on my Instagram story.
Twitch.tv.
I do have a Twitch. It's not on there.
It's on Facebook.
I feel I've knocked down where I post stuff to 4 again. I've fully given up on Blue Sky, so I am now just really in Tumblr, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. And TikTok is very much
WordPress.
I mean, my website is made on WordPress.
There you go, 5 places.
I'm not actually posted on my website. I forget to update my website with news stuff loads. Occasionally I remember to post blogs. This is very a way off in the future. It's more just a spreading the word. I have an interesting thing as it being vaguely related to the topic of wrestling.
Okay.
As you may remember when we did the live show, we were really pioneering unethical game design. And I thought of a link here. Mainly, I thought of something interesting about wrestling and TTRPGs, which is they actually kind of both have an equivalent of... wrestling has an equivalent of the X card, basically, that they kind of invented independently. So in wrestling, if someone is actually injured and a referee spots this, they throw up their arms above their head crossed in an X. And that's a signal to you need to get medical staff out here. We're pulling this match. This is not continuing. Something bad has happened. And it's kind of a similarity to the X card in terms of it's an X signifying something apart from the fiction we are telling is actually upsetting and we need to stop for this reason.
What makes you bring this up?
The relevant thing is that sometimes in wrestling, they fake the X. They'll have a referee do it. Yeah, they'll have a referee do it, and presumably they've clued up people around them but not the audience, so that the wrestler can then, fight through their injuries.
Yeah, that's cool.
They fake, the... And, to be fair, I know lots of people do not like this, because they're
it seems unethical, because it's oh, shit, what if they actually injure themselves? Oh, throws up the fake X. Wait, no, that's a real X.
Yeah, that confusion is really, could be really bad. And also there's the thing of, what level of audience is this for? This is for an audience who know the secret signs.
Yeah.
It's not really done much anymore, though I do remember a thing which I did find funny, is when, a wrestler was, faking, a heel wrestler was very dramatically faking, oh no, I'm hurt, I can't wrestle, and, their buddy came round and was fake throwing up the X and was no. That one works fine because, only the referee's supposed to do it, so there's no possibility of having a confusion.
I get it as, a fighting through your pain, and, the baddie being, I can't go on, and then they look away, oh, I can't look at the injuries, haha, gets you from behind, or whatever.
Yeah, and I wondered in a sort of okay, we've done unethical game design. What's unethical gameplay if you are faking the X card? Really want to emphasize at the start of this thought experiment, I don't think people should do this. But I'm just wondering what's the equivalent of that?
Well, I'm just last night in my City of Mists game, my character met their father, and it's I'd imagined them as kind of abusive, but then they were not played that way at all by the GM.
Oh, that is interesting.
So it's do I want to X card and be no, actually, they should be way worse?
I've played this in a weird way, in a way that, it's really hard to figure out with it. Yeah, that's a weird thing. I guess that's a thing where, sometimes more specific to useful. The problem with doing this is that, like, the faking the X in wrestling... The problem with doing this beyond the ethics of it, which are so fucked, but, like, faking the X in wrestling is for an audience, whereas, like, it's not... You're not tricking the people you're wrestling with or playing with. Whereas, like, in TTRPGs, the audience is the players. Unless it's an actual play. I could totally see how you kayfabe it. I could totally see how an actual play could kayfabe an X card. Once again, don't think they should do it. I think it would be setting sort of a bad example if you're doing a thing of like, no, we're gonna fake you X carding something so that then you can power through, and I guess they actually fuck it, let's leave this content in. Which would also, like I say, terrible message to send. Probably not worth the drama. Probably would just make people uncomfortable that they're witnessing maybe someone not respecting their own limits.
It gets you some articles on Lynn Codator's website, but...
Yeah, so this is my pitch for, like, what if actual play, I guess, was more like wrestling? By which I mean so much worse. Like, I'll also, for in this case, let's pitch an actual play where you blade.
Speaking of Link Codator, I think actual plays are the wrestling of RPGs.
Yeah, I think that article was Row the other one, but yeah. I think actual play and wrestling have a good comparison. I do think wrestling and RPGs in general have a quite similarity, but with the exception of the fact that, like, there is not usually a separate audience. Which is a big part of wrestling. But, like, the layers of, like, you're a performer, you're playing a character, you're not actually your character actually doing these things.
So, go on then. I think it's an RPG where you play as people playing an RPG. Not in a die sort of way. You are playing as actual players. Like, you're on Dimension 20.
I was going to say, I feel we are reinventing layers of players, but now it's about actual play.
Yeah.
But yeah,
but you actually like play like the RPG, like you're playing as so in this episode I'm going to be the Brendan Lee Mulligan type, and I'm going to talk about capitalism a lot. But my character in the game is like a swashbuckling thief, and we come across somebody who's like, we're showing. I think we're kind of showing like communists in a bad light here. Can we like change this? Can we like change the script a little bit, guys?
Yeah, I feel like probably the element of this is you are mainly playing the first, like the deepest layer, which is the RPG / actual play they're doing, but you're occasionally pulling back to this thing. And I guess whoever your GM for the actual play layer is, whether that's the same person GMing in the game, I sort of imagine it's maybe not, has responsibility for saying, like, giving audience or production things. I feel like they probably, like, maybe someone gets, like, pulled or stuff. The interesting... You know how I've talked about meta-theatricality before? Because I'm a wanker.
Probably, yes.
There was a play I read in my Renaissance drama unit in my second year of uni. Even though my Renaissance drama unit mainly focused more on early modern drama, they pointed that out. I don't know why it was called that. I guess they liked the word Renaissance. And it was a play called The Night of the Burning Pestle, which you can look up. I think there might be some like filmed versions of it. It's fun. Basically, the plot of it is like you were supposed to be watching this play, and then people sitting in the audience who are actually actors start yelling and interrupting the play and demanding changes. They're like, this weird romance is making fun of like the humble people of the city. There should be a greengrocer in this play who should be a heroic knight. And so like they are setting up this thing because they're acquiescing. That's not the right word. They're acquiescing?
Yeah, they're
going along with the wishes.
Compromise, yeah.
Agreeing, yeah. That was the problem where I couldn't land on the wanky word, but I also forgot what the normal word was for that. Yeah, they're agreeing with their demands and going along with it, but also stuff keeps getting changed in that sense as well. And I kind of feel like this is a level of that, like, because I feel like it's probably... You're probably not just straightforwardly, like, an actual play company. I imagine you must be, like, assuming, like, this is probably live stream, and you have a demanding audience who you do frequently, like, give in to demands of.
Yeah. I think you have, like, a deck of cards or something and you flip it over and it, like, reveals part of, like, the live chat or something, and it's like, oh my god, what if they kissed? Like, oh my god, what if... why hasn't the talking dog showed up this episode? Like, so you've got to, like, write these shit in, like...
Yeah.
Or, like, your producer in your ear or something, which is, like, the GM texting a character, like, you should introduce this plot point to the story or something, like...
Yeah, I think... Yeah, I enjoy, like, the idea of this being cards, and, like, maybe some more mechanics for, like, the extra layer stuff, which I could see, like, growing and shrinking a bit, depending on it. I think, like, there's maybe a fun thing in... Like, this is not my experience, because I was quite sort of, adult and stuff by the time I started getting into RPGs, but, like, I do know that some people's, like, journey to, like, coming out as trans did involve RPGs. I think there's stuff with, obviously, like, if you say, like, oh yeah, we did this romance, then, like, I think there's a really interesting thing, like, continuing to explore, like, the bleed between, like, the actual play performers and their characters, and how they negotiate that. Like, do you suddenly go, like, depending on how much, like, control of whatever everyone is outside of it you're giving to players, which I sort of assume you give a lot, it is a thing of, like, can players come in one day and just go, like, oh yeah, we think our, you know, actual player characters broke up, so, like, they're probably gonna really hard drop that romance that was being developed, and so that's now a back of mind requirement for what you're doing in the session.
But then all the chat is like, why aren't they flirting? I only watch this for the flirting. If you don't flirt right now, I'm going to stop watching. So
yeah, I do think there's, like, a really fun thing of, like, yeah, being able to go, like, oh, yeah, my characters realize they're gay now, because they were playing a gay character, and they got more into it than they realized. But, yeah, this is fun. I like this, genuinely. It's very absurd, but I do actually enjoy the sort of absurdity of it. And I do think it does actually hit a lot of the sort of human drama shit I find interesting. But when in the game we write on this, in the book that is written, we're just imagining, obviously, do we include any rules for, like, the final layer, like the deepest layer of the actual play? Or do we just say that, like, you pick whatever game and you're playing that, and you're using those rules at all, and we give nothing? Or do we also say, oh, here's our mini system for the game that's being played?
Think, like, the system has to be, like, super easy to grok. Like, you have maybe, like, 2 or 3 playing cards that you just give to people. Here's the entire rule set. It's maybe, like, super basic, like, 1d20, 11 plus, succeed, or whatever. Like, because the focus isn't the game itself, it's the people playing the game.
Yeah,
you don't
that's
want to
why
get
part
bogged
of me
down
was...
in...
Yeah.
It's like, you just use the resolution system from Quest, and there's like, oh, you're playing as the fighter, so you get +2 to sword stuff.
I think that's probably, I guess, also an interesting question of how you approach this. Are you doing, like, sort of vignettes of what the actual play is? Or is it like, no, you play that whole session, it's just, like, it's maybe a bit shorter, and also, like, outside of in between that, you're constantly, like, pulling away to, like, the real-world characters?
I think you do, like, 1 or 2 scenes from an episode, like you're saying, vignettes. But, like, oh, so in this episode... We killed the dragon, whatever. Someone did a heroic sacrifice. Do we want to play out that heroic sacrifice?
Yeah, that I can see, and then that makes sense to have, like, smaller, straightforward rules.
Yeah, and then, like, each scene or whatever, you're going to have, like, the chat interrupting or your producer interrupting or whatever.
Yeah.
That makes it easier to influence it like that, rather than...
Yeah, I like that version if so much of the emphasis is on, like, the bleed of the characters, and it's more like we're not in the specifics of the game. There's probably, like, another version where you flip it, where you're mainly playing this game, but are also getting more just, like, small scenes of other characters. I think I'm more interested in the drama of the characters, of the drama of the actual player characters, rather than that. God, I do love this. I once again do feel we have sequelized layers of players, because I was starting to think more about layers of players and be like, oh yeah, what if instead of the Shakespeare thing I was like, oh, it's maybe a map-making, town-building game, where each part you are like figuring out loads of the town and then improving a play to it. I was contemplating going back to layers of players. What do we call the actual play one?
I think it's like Bleed: the actual play RPG.
Yeah, no, I feel like the Bleed is probably in the title.
Or like we just get the license for an actual play series and have like pre-written characters for everybody who's ever been on the show.
This is interesting. That's an interesting one, because I'm like, ooh, that's both
and then
fun,
you're writing real people fan
be...
fiction.
Yeah, I'd find that really weird. Unless
we like, lean really heavily into it.
Yeah, or unless I guess it's like a actual play series that does like change over its cast enough, and so the beat is more like, hey, we've got this name brand, but also you're all a brand new cast of this show.
Yeah, what if it was like, oh, and in this season we have somebody from season 1, 2 from season 2, like...
No, I was saying not playing real people. I was finding a way you could get the license but not be doing real person fic.
Oh, what's the point then?
I understand.
It's Fantasy High, but none of the characters you know are present.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the danger of the actual play side of it. But that's fun. Yeah, Bleed. It's either called Bleed or it's something about like bleeding out.
So, what were you saying about a town building RPG? Like, were you saying like you're doing your plays in different parts of the town or something?
Yeah, I was thinking more about layers of players, and I was like, okay, what if it was more of an actual game and not just riffed on what was there? And I was like, oh, you're a traveling troupe, and I think maybe for each town you go to, you do a bit of a sort of town building game to just establish like some of the people who live there and what their concerns are. And then that decides, like, then, you know, you come up with a play and have to, like, maybe make some alterations to it based on stuff. And then you, like, zoom into, like, you know, 3 or 4 scenes and are maybe rolling to see how well your performance is. To see whether you're going to be really well liked by this town and get to stay for a bit, or if it's like, oh no, they're practically running you out of town. You did a production of Much Ado About Nothing, like, and, like, didn't really change any of the fake affair stuff, and there's actually been a big scandal in this town, and it's really pissed a lot of people off. You gotta get the fuck out of here. But yeah, I thought of the idea of, like, oh, it's a town building thing, so then that's why you've got, like, here's why we've got to vary our shit to this place.
Yeah. And then you could use that as, like, a... What was the name of that shit? Like, For the Queen or something? Like, people use that as a world-building thing.
I know people use... Called? No, people use The Quiet Year for world-building a lot.
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I do consider a lot of my games to be, like, very clearly descended from things that are descended from For the Queen. Not For the Queen. From The Quiet Year, but I myself have never actually played it. Which is interesting.
Me neither.
Yeah, I could see that. That's just sort of like a fun thing. I like the idea of performance. I enjoy performance, and so I enjoy when games are about performance. So, like...
You say that word again?
Performance?
Yeah, isn't it performance?
What?
You're saying performance.
No, I'm saying performance.
Okay, now okay, maybe I'm just going mad. Let me know in the comments.
Yeah, I want people backing me up here. I want people backing me up. I can't believe you would do this violence to me on the former Speech Therapy Girlies podcast.
I'm trying to help you. It's tough love.
No!
Okay. I have an advert on my table. It's for like a t-shirt brand that I got a flyer for at UKGE. And I keep looking at this terrible t-shirt that I'm going to probably end up buying just because it's very funny. So there's a picture of a skeleton on it. This is my pitch for a game, by the way. Picture of a skeleton on it, with like a moon behind him, like you know how saints in stained glass have like halos behind them, like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And around it, it says, "I am your dungeon master," and then below it says, "My creativity is limitless, as is my power." So, what is this game? Like, who is this guy? Why is your dungeon master so full of themselves that they thought, "Oh, I'm gonna get a T-shirt with that written on it"?
I don't know. Is this just like bad D&D culture stuff?
So it's a game where you have to be like a 2010 2010's Facebook post idea of a good D&D game, where it's like one person's the rules lawyer, one person's stoned out of their mind. The DM is on a power trip.
Yeah. I'm now curious about like a game that is maybe about... I think it's maybe interesting if you did a rotating GM thing in this situation. Yeah, like the GM position is a thing that rotates, but also is such a cursed chalice.
Yeah, it's like you were just normal people, but then, oops, you become the dungeon master.
Yeah.
Wait, what if
like,
you... I was going to say, what if you just become the dungeon...
Loads.
Yeah, you just become the dungeon master in real life. How do you manage having to narrate everything around you or nothing happens?
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah. This is
like
very the Charlie Kaufman Nicolas Cage film adaptation.
My screenwriting teacher talked a lot about that, but I've not watched it.
Yeah. I don't know if you'd enjoy it or not, because I don't know how much your taste for, like, meta bullshit is.
But maybe I'll have a look. I remember getting mad about... who's the guy who wrote Forever Night 5-1?
Kurt Vonnegut?
Yeah, I remember getting mad about Kurt Vonnegut in my university days because one of my teachers was like, "Oh yeah, no... authors having author inserts who are just themselves has been a thing since Vonnegut." And I'm like, okay, but I'm not talking about Vonnegut. I'm talking about fucking Lemony Snicket right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I was asked recently by my boyfriend was asking me like, "Oh, what's your favorite author?" And I said who my favorite author was. And he was like, "Maybe I'll read that." And I was like, "Oh no, it's really meta and postmodern, and I know you'll hate that. Don't read it. You'll be really angry."
Damn, that is not what I would have thought he would be like. I'm not gonna lie.
I have a pitch for a game. Because I sent this pitch to you, where I said, what if we just made the most granular RPG possible? Now, like, in so many RPGs, there's, like, a single, like, core mechanic. Like, oh, you do an action, you roll a dice. Or you roll this many dice. It's influenced by stats or things. But I'm like, oh, you know, are we doing the same thing? When I talk to someone versus attack them, a thing I apparently often do. Like, you know, I'm not using the same parts of my body and my mind. Maybe it makes more sense if these are, like, broken down. And that every meaningfully distinct action should have its own system. So, for instance, like, you know, any kind of like physical melee combat is a trick-taking game. Any, like, ranged weapon use, that would probably be, like, a dice roll, probably, like, a target number, I'd guess, because that's, you know, about proximity. Convincing people, that's probably got its own token economy system, because that better reflects that. Like, lying to people, I think, is a side game. Like, it's literally just, like, left or right, and you've always got to guess that each time, because then it's sort of about knowing the GM. Every single meaningfully distinct action we can think of has whatever we decide is the best system for that thing, with no care or consideration to the whole. We just really... the crunchiest, most specific game. I think this is a good idea, right?
So you've been pitching this to me for the last fortnight off the show. And in our Discord DMs, it sounded like total shite, I'm not going to lie. But the way you're pitching it to me, I'm kind of into it. So I want this on my desk by next episode, please. Thank you for listening to Game Soup.
No.